Global shipping is in crisis. COVID-19 outbreaks have shut down major ports in southern China. That's causing delivery delays and product shortages around the world. Could this derail economic recovery from the pandemic? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Dareen Abughaida. A COVID-19 outbreak at one of the world's busiest ports in China is having a ripple effect on global trade. Businesses right around the world are being warned of delivery delays until the end of the year. And that's led to concerns about economic recovery from the pandemic. Well, dozens of COVID-19 cases have been reported in the southern Chinese province of Guangdong, a major manufacturing and exporting hub. The local government has imposed lockdowns to contain the outbreak, and that's slowing activity in the region's container ports. One of the busiest ports is Yantian, and it's now only operating at 40% capacity. Well, the world's largest shipping company, Maersk, says the disruption is worse than the blockage of the Suez Canal in March. Vessels are waiting more than 2 weeks to dock. Ships have been diverted to other ports near Yantian that are also at capacity. Well, factories in China are struggling to get their products to the rest of the world.
Our orders have been increasing at a rate of about 20%, but now the ocean freight price is rising and the ships for overseas shipping is very limited, making it impossible for us to deliver our products to our clients.
Industry analysts say shipping costs from China to Europe have risen 300% since last year and by 200% to the U.S. West Coast. The congestion is leading to shortages of consumer goods and raw materials. A major U.S. retailer, Home Depot, told American media it's contracted its own container ship to import products. Let's now bring in our guest. Joining us from London is Guy Platten, who's the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Shipping. In Plymouth, Stavros Karamperidis, lecturer in maritime economics at the University of Plymouth. Over in Copenhagen is Bueger, who's a professor of international relations at the University of Copenhagen. Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for speaking to us on Inside Story. Guy, over to you first. How much more strain will this disruption from China put on the international shipping industry after, of course, having to deal with a critical shortage of shipping containers due to the pandemic from last year and that week-long blockage in the Suez Canal earlier this year?
Well, I think our estimates is this could be at least 3 times worse than the incident with the Ever Given, which blocked the Suez Canal for 6 days. I mean, we've been going through a series of this throughout the pandemic. You know, we've got ports are shut down. We've also had our crews heavily impacted with the COVID-19 pandemic in the sense they haven't been able to change out when they should be changing out. So all these are cumulative type of things which are now having a real world impact on the supply chains like we've been warning for over a year now.
And let me ask you, when you say 3 times worse, what exactly are you basing that assessment on?
Basically, the ship was delayed for 6 weeks. You heard from the Maersk, the ships are delayed at the moment. It's some weeks there just being able to load and discharge. So you just do that knock-on effects. Whereas one ship blocking a canal, there was an alternative route around the south coast of Africa. It did cause delays. It's still causing some knock-on delays. This clearly impacting the actual loading of cargoes. It is going to have a disproportionate impact when compared to even the Ever Given. So we'll see the impacts of this in the coming months. And of course, as the summer in the Northern Hemisphere moves on and we move into the winter period, we can only see this being exacerbated unless we can come up with a workable solution about how to keep port and crews safe to deliver the goods throughout this pandemic.
Stavros, how uncharted are the waters, no pun intended here, for the shipping industry?
You're hitting the head on the nail. You know, it's like it's a totally uncharted territory, and we have to realize that logistics is the name of the game. And unfortunately, that's a side effect that was difficult to predict, a year and a half ago. And we shouldn't forget, the problems that we're having with the lack of microchips that has slowed down the car production all over the globe. So it's kind of difficult to forecast what exactly is going to be the impact. But definitely we're seeing that, as Guy mentioned early on, the Ever Given event has created, especially here in the UK, a lack of the container ships being delayed and delivered over here in the UK. So that had a huge knock-on effect in the logistics sector, which is still being felt over here.
Christian, this all really shows, I guess, how much global supply chains rely on shipping. What do you think the implications are for global trade right now? And what does this disruption mean for the global economic recovery?
Quite obviously, we often forget how important shipping actually is as a critical infrastructure, and that after the ever given incident is quite another reminder. We need to pay more attention to what goes on at sea, and ports are quite obviously crucial in all of that. I think there's an urgent need now to rethink of how COVID impacts the shipping industry, and then also ask the question, is that only a problem of the pandemic, or should we think broader and ask whether there are structural problems actually on how we think about the shipping industry, how we regulate it, and when and how ports can be shut like this?
Yeah, we're going to get into these topics in just a moment, in fact. But Guy, over to you. What will this actually do for shipping costs that are already quite high?
Well, it's clearly, we've seen the sky-high rates being charged at the moment. There's an undercapacity in terms of ships, but there's an overcapacity in terms of goods that need to be shipped as well. So, and that's just having a knock-on effect. The pandemic, the lockdowns around the world has seen consumers order more goods as they stop going out so much. And this then, we've seen the congestion on the west coast of the states. So this is just going to exacerbate the problems. But I agree with the last caller as well. We need to look at solutions here if we're going to manage this, because shipping has kept on delivering throughout, yet the impact on the crews, the impact on the port workers is immense, and we have to find a medium to longer term solution here. We're starting to see vaccinations roll out amongst seafarers, but there's still huge restrictions on travel around the world, and this is impacting on the ability to operate the ships as well.
And Christian, what does this actually mean for consumers themselves?
Well, certainly we don't have to worry about getting our Christmas gifts or similar. It might mean, however, that there will be a shortage in supply in some goods, but that in the end might be not the worst thing on the planet, because it might be an invitation to shop locally and rethink what we actually need, and take that also as an opportunity, so to say, until the situation changes.
Stavros, the port in China in Guangdong is a major shipping hub, according to reports, and accounts for about 24% of China's total exports. Talk us through the role that that Guangdong plays in the global supply chain and how significant it actually is.
That's a significant port because, as you said, it's in the top 20 of the global ranking in terms of the port capacity. And that means that if a port as the one that we're talking, the river delta area, the Pearl River delta area, is being affected and is be running at the moment, according to reports, at 40% of capacity. That means that we're not going to have the consumer goods that we order. Don't forget that China is the world's factory, and most of the goods that we're consuming are being produced over there in that specific region. So that means that a lot of the goods that we're expecting to have, we're going to require more time to be receiving those goods. So at the end, we really have to think about the resilience of the overall supply chain and think about how that resilience can be enhanced with various investments that are needed in the overall supply chain.
And Stavros, is it possible to drill down on which industries in particular are going to be most affected, and perhaps which countries?
That's kind of an early days. As you know, China is trading with all the countries, so it's kind of difficult to say that X country is going to have more impact than Y country. But definitely, in terms of global production, we're going to see a reduction in the goods availability, and that, of course, is going to increase in long term, in short and long terms, the price of the goods. As we've seen already with the Ever Given, we've seen a small spike in the goods that we are consumed here in Europe.
And Guy, over to you. You were mentioning this just a moment ago. Let's look at actual businesses and discuss how they have to change their supply chains. What do you think they need to do?
I think that shipping is a resilient industry. We'll move the ships to where the goods are to be shipped. So we're not seeing a particular shift in towards where the supply chains are happening. You know, we'd heard the professor talking about shopping more locally. We're not really seeing huge evidence of that yet. So it's too early to say whether supply chains will permanently be shifted. But, you know, we are a resilient industry and we will get through this.
Stavros, do businesses, you were mentioning this just a moment ago, that businesses may have to rethink their supply chain so they're not reliant on getting stuff from just one place when logistics are broken. What do you think they need to do?
Actually, we've seen that kind of reaction from the logistics sector. If we go back in February and March, we'll see that a lot of the ports in the west coast of the United States, they were having exactly the similar issue. They were having huge congestion. A lot of vessels were queuing outside the ports because there wasn't any berth availability. And what a lot of logistics companies have done, they put a lot of shipments, a lot of containers through the Suez Canal so they can reach to the east coast. And what we've seen, you know, unfortunately, back then we had the closure of the Suez Canal with the Ever Given, and that was kind of a logistical nightmare for the US because both coasts were kind of difficult to be served. So at the end of the day, we really have to think holistically when we're talking about logistics, and we really have to integrate maritime ports, especially because it's the critical node between the land and the sea, and how that can be run smoothly.
Christian, Guy was saying just a moment ago that the shipping industry is in fact resilient. I mean, do you agree with that assessment? How equipped do you think the shipping sector is in responding to crises, and particularly over the past 1.5 years or so, where it's really been one crisis after the next?
Yes, but obviously the system is under stress, but at the same time, the shipping industry is also famous to always make money under whatever circumstances. And there's a reason for that, because quite obviously we need the transport industry for the global economy. But then at the same time, I think it's also an invitation to start thinking more about the sea, think more holistically about how the shipping industry is part of the global economy. And quite obviously, there's also a dark side to the shipping industry, and that both concerns the climate discussion and the CO2 emissions, but then also the series of other shipping disasters that often do not make it to the headlines. And here I'm thinking in particular about disasters like the one in Sri Lanka or the oil spill off Mauritius. So we really need to take a second look, so to say, at the shipping industry and see it as part of the ocean and approach it from that perspective. And quite obviously, ports are also a crucial part of it. So I think there's an urgent need to think in broader global governance in terms of how we use the sea and who controls shipping, ports, but also ensures the security and safety of shipping.
Well, let me ask you, whose responsibility is that then? Would it fall to the governments? Would it fall to the private companies from the shipping industry? Who takes that on?
Well, for now, the shipping industry is one of the weakest regulated one. But obviously, we have an international body, the International Maritime Organization. And this international body actually coordinates very, very closely with the shipping industry, perhaps too closely. And in that sense, it would be useful to see governments taking more concern over what goes on at sea, to take another look at the shipping industry, but then also to ask what is the role of governments, and can a government, such as what is happening right now, just shut down a port that we are crucially dependent on? So these are the kind of questions that need to be asked. And of course, it raises the question whether the IMO as an instrument is enough for asking the question. And I think it could be urgently brought to the attention of the G20, for instance, or other informal groups of states.
Guy, do you agree with that? Do you think governments should be taking on this role in a larger way?
I think there's a little bit of issue with that. The IMO is not a standalone organisation. It's a collection of governments coming together to regulate the industry. And we are quite a highly regulated industry as a result of that, through various conventions, from safety of life at sea to marine pollution. And and shipping is the safety record is been much improved over the years. And of course, there's always accidents happen, which we regret, and we learn the lessons from it. But it's a question of governments also living up to their own obligations. By all means, use the IMO and regulate and come together. But also what we've seen over this pandemic is governments just getting rid of their responsibilities, particularly in regards to crew members. They haven't recognised seafarers as key workers. They're happy to take the ships in, but then they put all sorts of restrictions, which has really exacerbated the problems within the industry. So yes, governments need to take attention to shipping, but it needs to be a holistic approach which looks after all the elements, not just safety, but the welfare of crews, and also coming together to get good regulation, to get shipping safe and to reduce our environmental footprint.
So do you think there's the political will to do that, Guy? I mean, will this pandemic, has it been sort of an infection point, an opportunity to reflect on the shipping industry and the way it works? Or is it going to go back to business as usual?
I'd like to think people have a much more awareness of the shipping. It's really interesting. We've been making a big play about the welfare of our crews and shipping keeping going over this last year. But it wasn't until a container ship got stuck in the Suez Canal for 6 days that the world suddenly realised the fragility of the supply chains and paid some more attention. Shipping is absolutely vital. So I hope lessons have been learned from the pandemic. And on terms of environmental stuff, we see a lot of rhetoric from senior political figures, but that also needs to be translated into good regulation and a clear direction of travel so that we can invest in the ships of the future with some certainty.
Stavros, can you weigh in on this debate? Where do you think trade policy and regulation needs to head to next, and who takes the responsibility for it?
I think I will echo what the previous two participants said, and I would say that this is a part of a more holistic approach that we really have to take. Mr. Say, for example, the chief executive of the U.S. National Retail Federation has dropped a letter to President Biden 2 days ago to ask about action because the port congestion is adding days and weeks in their supply chain, and there's inventory shortages in the U.S., and that's affecting their business ability to serve the customers. So they realize that, it's not only one piece of the puzzle. Everybody has to come and sit on the table. Policy, regulators, shippers, shipping companies, port operators. Everybody has to come sit on the same table and talk about the problems that the shipping and the overall logistics sector is facing, because if we don't deal them today, we're going to face them again and again tomorrow.
Here's the thing, though, Stavros. I mean, you're speaking about what governments should say. Now, the official line out of China by the Chinese Commerce Ministry spokesman has said that Guangdong, of course, in the south of China, the resurgence of COVID-19 cases hadn't yet led to a pronounced impact on foreign trade. What do you make of that statement? Is that just a PR spin?
To be honest, there are different regions in China, and each of them, they're kind of reacting differently. So I can't really comment because I haven't seen the statement. But what I would say is that, it's like pandemic is here, and it's here for good, as it seems. And as Guy said earlier on, is like crew in the shipping sector has been tired because it was difficult to make changes, with the current situation. Vaccination is going really slow with the crew over there in shipping. So we really have to take a holistic approach, and we shouldn't really, postpone the decisions or say, oh, that's someone else's problem and not mine. We really have to take actions today in order to improve resilience in the logistics sector, because if we don't do that, we're going to suffer in long terms a lot of costs and a lot of delays, which I'm sure that the customers are not willing to pay.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more on, I mean, you keep referring to this term holistic approach. What do you mean exactly by that?
By the holistic approach is that we should try to establish connections, as we said earlier on, between the maritime sector, ships, have a chat with the ports about how they can interchange data. Nowadays, we're talking about digitalization in shipping, and shipping is one of the sectors that is really lagging behind. And in order to apply a holistic approach, we really have to exchange data. We're living in 2021. Everybody wants to know exactly where the cargo is, under what kind of conditions. Everybody's checking on their smartphones 24/7. So we really have to increase visibility in the overall supply chain. And the only way to do it is by exchanging information with each other. So really the port has to build a software or a system that's going to talk with the ships, and the ships have to be able to implement that kind of system so we can have a smooth transition of data. So for instance, when the container arrives in the dock, load it in the container ship. So we have an exchange of information, when it's going to be arriving, at what time it's going to depart, where it's been placed at the moment, and all that kind of stuff. And that, of course, it needs some kind of time to achieve that kind of holistic approach.
Guy, is there any sort of more plans, more investments into the industry to get more ships and to upgrade ports themselves?
I think there's a huge plans to invest in the industry. Obviously, we have an uncertain future in terms of the decarbonisation. We need to transition to zero carbon fuels, which will require trillions of dollars of investment to make that happen. But I think the one thing that has accelerated, and a good thing over the last year, is digitalisation. We heard that the last speaker as well talk a little bit about that. But that, I see great strides being taken forward with that, and a lot of work being put into to agree common standards in terms of electronic paperwork and all sorts of bills of lading and things like that to smooth and make the process much more efficient. And if you've got an efficient process, if you've got efficient ports, that's going to lead to more efficient shipping as well.
Christian, would you like to respond to what Guy was just saying? And also, you mentioned just a short while ago the issue of climate change in particular. Does the shipping industry need more regulation and transparency when it comes to this issue of climate change?
Yes, I think the core point here is that we need to get out of this mindset where everything is driven by efficiency concerns. This is partially where the current stress of the shipping industry comes from, and why and how everything has become driven by efficiency concern has much to do with governments around the world turning a blind eye on the sea. And that unfortunately has produced a global shipping economy where not enough attention is paid to other concerns, and that concerns the environment. We have been talking about crew stress and crew fatigue before. I was mentioning safety, and that's both oil spills, but also the substantial amount of containers that get lost every year at sea, which has a tremendous environmental impact as well. And here we are clearly not doing enough. And part of the reason of that is clearly that there has been this culture of secrecy around shipping much more than in other industries. Just think about how much we are talking today about the global tech industry and the internet, and how much we are having a regulatory debate there, a public regulatory debate. And now compare that to the crucial world of shipping, the infrastructure that is perhaps even more important than the internet. I think there's an urgent need here to pay more attention, but also a public regulatory debate.
Guy, last word to you.
I would agree. We need it's put into focus how important shipping is, and we need to have that debate about the future of shipping, about trade, and how it's all going to work and gel together. So on that, I'm in complete agreement. We need more focus so that we can have that debate and we can move forward into and decarbonise the industry and ensure that world trade keeps flowing, because 90% of everything travels by sea, and we're absolutely integral to the overall supply chain, as has been seen.
Thank you so much. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks to all my guests, Guy Platten, Stavros Karamperidis, and Christian Bueger. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is AJ Inside Story. For myself and the whole team right here in Doha, thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.